So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Zdenka. I'm a past president of the Marine Technology Society. Along with MTS, these dialogues are being sponsored by the Global Ocean Observing System, industry partners Kongsberg Discovery and L3Harris, and through a grant from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the U.S. Integrated Ocean Observing System. This is our third Dialogue with Industry series, and we're focused on ocean observing of the future. We welcome our participants and our observers, and we certainly appreciate that you are joining us. So I'd like to start our discussion with an overview of the ocean enterprise. Many of you, rightly so, may be asking the question, what is the ocean enterprise? To that answer, we first need to look at the level of the ocean or blue economy. The OECD defines the ocean economy as inclusive of traditional marine industries like fishing, shipping, oil, and gas, but it also includes emerging ocean industries like offshore, renewable energy, aquaculture, marine minerals, tourism, maritime monitoring and surveillance, and biotechnology. OECD's April 2025 report, Ocean Economy of the 2050, stated that if the ocean economy was compared to a country, it would be the fifth largest economy. From 1995 to 2020, it contributed between 3 and 4% of the global gross value added and employed up to 133 million full-time equivalents. Over the past 25 years, the global economy doubled in real terms from 1.3 trillion US dollars in GVA in 1995 to 2.6 trillion in 2020, growing at an annual rate of 2.8%. The ocean enterprise is a nested component of the ocean economy within the realm of maritime monitoring, particularly as focused on the field of ocean observing, forecasting, and services spanning the public, private, and academic sectors. Members of the ocean enterprise are engaged with providing observation, infrastructure measurement, forecasting, operational services to inform marine decision-making. The Ocean Enterprise Initiative developed from the successful Dialogue with Industry series held in 2022 and 2023, and subsequent development of the Dialogues with Industry roadmap. Our mission is to grow an ocean observing system through better public-private partnerships by creating a globally inclusive forum to understand market opportunities, incentivize oceans innovations, facilitate data and information exchange, develop a workforce, and proliferate scalable technology to achieve benefits for stakeholders across the entire ocean enterprise. The roadmap lays out 3 priorities, as you can see on this slide, along with some of the types of activities under our initiatives, such as these dialogues. The ocean information value chain is a framework we use to illustrate how ocean observations are converted through a wide range of interactions, transformations, and service delivery mechanisms into products that have value to decision makers and business leaders. The value chain approach allows us to illustrate the importance of ocean information and related services. The graphic also visualizes the ocean enterprise and its interconnected components and activities across the ocean information value chain. The blue discs at the bottom visualize the current level of private industry involvement. They offer an estimate of the current relative market size, and the arrows indicate our estimate of private industry growth potential in each area. All market segments can benefit from innovation and can be commercially exploited. But what defines the ocean enterprise, a mature ocean enterprise? On our slide is a proposed statement of what a mature ocean enterprise could mean. We offer this as background and context to all of you to consider during the discussions as they unfold. And we'd love your thoughts in both the chat and the background. So continuing with definitions, when the planning team determined that we wanted to do an ocean observing of the futures, and talk about both accessible ocean technologies and low-cost technologies, we found that there was no definitive definitions, and everybody had their own opinion of what that meant. So we decided after much discussion that we would propose the definitions. Now, both of them are found, and you can see them on the slide. Both of them are certainly characterized as a combination of sensors, instruments, and platform affordability in terms of cost, operations, and maintenance. But what distinguishes them from traditional ocean technologies is we provided, in the case of accessible ocean technologies, in terms of a reduction in magnitude of cost. For low cost, we propose the definition both in terms of a threshold price and magnitude of cost. For the threshold price, we noted that there could be differences related to observed parameters, but in general, less than $1,000 is the threshold. We will not specifically discuss these definitions, nor have these definitions been endorsed by the ocean observing community, but again are offered for context and background. We are very happy for you to provide comments in the chat, which are on these definitions, which will then be used in the dialogue reports and the background paper. So we drew a new diagram to augment the ocean information value chain. Using a radar chart, we mapped the current prevailing trends together with an estimate of technology readiness, time to prevalence, and their potential impact on the ocean enterprise. The center of the diagram represents lower technology readiness and a longer time before a market impact can be expected. The radially longer the distance, the more mature the trend, and the shorter the expected time for full impact. The potential impact of the trend is depicted by the point size. Some trends appear in more than one market segment. The largest number of trends is found in the first market segment, observing technologies, and decreases as the value chain progresses. While this could be a bias because of an observed technologies perspective of the authors, it could also represent a real indication of where and how innovation is currently happening in the field. The numbers on the radar chart correspond to these items, where those in orange we judged as specific accessible ocean technologies. And during this dialogue, we will talk about enablers, infrastructure, and technologies during the dialogue. Again, we're putting this diagram out as context and very much welcome the enterprise to comment on this through the chat and directly with the Ocean Enterprise Initiative. Through these dialogues, we're hoping to better understand market aggregation and demand opportunities to scale technologies that can foster innovation and speed them to market. Our planning team has tried to craft these dialogues differently. Instead of a single panel or session at the many ocean venue and conferences, all of which are important, we spent quite a bit of time curating 3 dialogues that build on each other. We look forward to hearing from you on actionable recommendations, and our moderator will continue to push in that direction. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator today. Hans is a member of our MTS team and serves as Senior Director of the Ocean Enterprise Initiative. Prior to joining the Ocean Enterprise Initiative, Hans was the Director of the Great Lakes Water Studies Institute at Northwestern Michigan College, and before that spent 2 decades at the University of Michigan as a researcher, engineer, and administrator, spanning hydrodynamics, oceaneering, and marine technology. Again, let me thank everyone for participating, and Hans, for you moderating. We really look forward to a robust conversation. Hans, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Zdenka, for that introduction. Great to be here and great to see everyone joining us today. It's my pleasure for beginning this dialogue series and joining you all in this series on ocean observing of the future. I'm just going to go through a little bit of the actual logistics that we have for today's conversation, and that is, for our invited participants, we ask that you keep your video on during the discussion and invite you to use the raise hand feature so I can call on you to share your thoughts with the group. In some cases, I may direct a question at a particular participant or a group of participants. In the interest of keeping the discussion moving, I may shift to a new question before I've been able to call on everyone who raises their hand. And I apologize in advance to anyone that I cut short or miss. In the interest of time, I will not be introducing each of our invited participants. Instead, please tell folks your name, your role, and your organization when you speak for the first time. And for our audience participants, please listen to the conversation and type your questions or thoughts in the Q&A for everyone to see. You can also layer in feedback to the questions or comments posted by everybody else. For everyone, please keep your microphones on mute when you are not speaking. So today our conversation is divided into 4 sessions. We've set aside roughly 35 minutes for questions and discussion in each of the first 3 sessions, and a short break in between. Depending on how the conversation is going, I may shorten or extend the sessions. And our final session will be an open discussion among both our participants and our observers. And please note that this dialogue, the Q&A, and the chat are all being recorded and will be made publicly available in the coming weeks. The content of the session report, however, will not include attribution to the comments or questions of any participant. So let's get started, have some fun, and I think is going to be a fantastic conversation today. And we're going to kick things off with looking at key components beyond sensors and platform. And that session really explores the broader components that Zdenka just highlighted from the ocean information value chain, and really focusing towards drivers for and metrics of accessibility. And as she had stated, we commonly approach accessibility sometimes from a pure upfront price perspective. However, true cost of ownership, including operations and maintenance, along with sensor capabilities, drive where accessibility can be further examined. With several new emerging technologies in development or on the horizon, how will these transform operations along with driving innovation and private sector engagement? So for our discussion, I'm going to start with the first question to the group, and that is it the cost of sensors that is primarily the driver to determine accessibility within the ocean information value chain? And please raise your hand and I will call on you. Go ahead, Alexis.
Thanks, Hans. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexei Broskov. I'm the founder of Ocean Hub Africa, an ocean impact incubator based in Cape Town, operating across Africa. Thanks for having me here. To answer the question, to give you my perspective to the question, and I'm going to impose a little bit, obviously not. The affordability matters, but it's not the only thing, right? Deployment, repairability, you talked about it, training, how much skill requirements is, necessary for maintaining and operating the technology, and modularity, right? So we can tailor it to local context, or at least in Africa, equally critical, not just the affordability, especially because logistics are very costly and tricky in coastal Africa, and maintenance capacity is very limited. So it must go way beyond just affordability. It starts with affordability, but not limited to this. Thank you.
Great. Great, thank you. We'll go on to Amy now.
Hi, I'm Amy West, a program manager for Synchro. It's a test bed here at Mbari. And thank you, Alexis. That's a lot of what I was going to say. A couple other things was we kind of polled our community on what we would call accessible. And a few other things was like it's in, perhaps in other languages, some of the technical guidance. That's really important, that there's like a nice, easy feedback process to the developer. And access to tech solutions, like you said, like finding things to repair within your own country. I would like locally sourced, that's really important. And just the ease of calibration and maintenance. I don't think we talked about that, but that's really key. Okay, thanks.
Okay, Amy. We'll go with Leif, then Andrew, and then Yi.
Yeah, hello, Leif Bilde from Kongsberg Discovery. So I'm a product manager of our digital ocean data platform, Blue Insight. I think there was a lot of good responses here already. I do hesitate to think about the sensor as the major cost driver. I think there's a few other things. We mentioned here operations and so on. Vessel time, crew, fuel, and so on. There are some obvious ways you can go to reduce that, but that is a significant cost, in collecting data. I think there's a lot of bespoke and manual steps in the data handling and data management. and so on. A lack of standards and so on. Lots of improvements that can be done there. So I think also another point maybe if you're looking at cheaper, lower cost, and what is the definition of cheap? It's got to be relative to the outcome and the use case and what you're trying to solve. So that's worth keeping in mind, I think.
Okay, thank you. Andrew?
All right, great, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm Andrew Thaler. I'm a deep sea ecologist and the founder and lead developer of the OpenCTD project. We develop low-cost open source CTDs for resource-limited communities. And I'm in agreement with the comments that have already been made, and would like to just echo that calibration really is kind of our biggest limiting factor for all of our instruments that we develop, and not just the ease of calibration, but also the independence of calibration. So when you have instruments that have to be sent back to the manufacturer to be manually calibrated once a year, if you're in a place where you can't ship things, internationally that regularly, that creates a major limitation in how usable those tools are. So having calibration standards that are able to be conducted by the end user in a reliable, consistent manner is generally our largest hurdle when we are developing our instruments.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Yi?
Thank you for the opportunity. Yi Chao here, founder, CEO of Seatrack, a startup company based in San Diego making profiling floats. Just a couple of points adding to what has been said, in addition to the cost of the sensors as a primary driver. Sensor have to be carried by a platform as we go more and more autonomous systems. And then both the sensor and the platform have to last long to deliver the quality data to the users. For example, for our experience, when our float running out of batteries, and then when I talked to the sensor company like Seabird, and then Seabird told us their CTD is still working. So sensor is still a good quality sensor. If the float dies, sensor will die with them in the autonomous system. So that's another point in measuring the cost of the entire system. In addition to the $1,000 threshold Stenka mentioned for the cost, as the system become matures, another way to measure is how much the data cost. For example, CTDs. If the sensor and the platform only lasts for 100 profiles, if you divide it by total cost by 100, if you last for 200 and 500, the cost will be quite different. So that's another way to look at in the cost and the scalability. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Yi. We'll go with Kate and then Tosta, and then we'll wrap that up with question 1. So go ahead, Kate.
Thank you, Hans. My name is Kate Crosman. I am a researcher with SINTEF Ocean here in Norway. We're a large research institute in the Nordics. I just wanted to pick up on something that Leif said about the cost being proportional to the use case, and sort of back the question. So I'm a social scientist in the interest of full disclosure. So that means I'm going to make everything more complicated, right? But just back it up from accessibility to the question of what is the use case, right? The question of we talk about meeting a societal demand, but societal demand is non-monolithic, and it varies very much by where we find ourselves in the world, as well as capacity and training and so on and so forth. So I think that you can make low-cost sensors, but if they're not meeting the needs of the markets that we're trying to identify and speak to, that accessibility is not going to get you very far. So I would recommend even thinking back and engaging deeply with some of these potential customers or partners in outside of sort of our regular stomping grounds to identify those needs, so that we can make sure that what we are making accessible speaks to those needs.
Great, thanks, Kate. And Tosta.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Tosta Tanno. I'm a chemical oceanographer at GeoMar Helmholtz Center of Ocean Research in Kiel in Germany. And there were many good points mentioned, but one point I want to raise here is training and capacity, and it comes down to having good standard operating procedures and best practices that are easily available for the users. I think that's a major hurdle for many teams, particularly in the Global South, but not only there. So in addition to the good points that were mentioned, I would like to point out SOPs and BPs. Thanks.
Great. Thanks everyone for kicking that off. And I think as we went through the discussion, we certainly had a broad perspective on all other considerations about making ocean observing more accessible. So I appreciate that people threaded in some additional comments there. I'm going to jump ahead in our question queue and ask the group, so what are the benefits of observing technologies that are categorized as accessible ocean technology? What would be their impact? Do we even need more accessible and low-cost technologies? And Amy, and then Alexi.
Thank you. This is a hot topic for me, so I love this. So I'll just concentrate on one area, which Alexi's probably going to talk about too, but I think about the coastal areas around the world that they're most obviously affected with ocean changes, and they're not all flush with cash or invest in ocean tech or have like awash with marine institutions like we are here in Monterey Bay. So simply put, like if you have more affordable options, just an increase in like moderately accurate data can improve the models, fills up spatial gaps. And I think it ultimately just strengthens some decision making. So you get outside of academia and your unlimited budgets to monitor oceans, you just have more community buy-in and public trust. And then that means more pressures, I think, on political systems to invest in ocean observing. So like when you have ocean observing, I guess, global ocean community understanding, then you have a better when you have a better global ocean understanding when you have local communities investing in their infrastructure. Thanks.
Thanks, Amy. Alexi.
Thanks. I'll keep my intervention very quick to leave space to other panelists. I give you a very concrete example. We've been working, I mean, with Amy and the Schmidt Marine Technology Partners, to name a few, on building an AUV that can work for coastal communities, accessible, right, for price, maintenance, and calibration and everything. And the whole reasoning behind it is we want to give these communities ownership of their own fate. Today, what's happening is we're flying scientists from the US, from Japan, from France, or wherever, in remote areas in coastal Africa, staying there for 3 weeks with the cost and the carbon footprint that this has, gathering data, going back into the labs, back in the global north, processing the information, and then pushing guidelines as what should be done onto those communities for their, for their good sake, I hear, but it's still, they are completely, they're not taking part in the process really. So giving them the ownership, the agency, the ownership of the data and the agency to own what's going to happen to them and lower the cost of such gathering of information and things like that are critical upsides, if you will, of accessible technologies in the Global South.
Thank you. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to ask Patrick Catalina and then go on to Gilbert.
Hi, good day. I'm Patrick Catalina, Project Technical Assistant at the University of the Philippines and working under the SUSTAIN program, a UN decade project within the Coast Predict program. So I agree actually with Amy, what she said. So accessible ocean technologies help the coastal communities like here in the Philippines to monitor coastal waters more effectively and to lead better early warning systems for fishers and aquaculture managers where majority of our livelihood came in. And of course, open and low-cost designs also support local innovation, faster training, and resilience, especially in our country where often ravaged by tech. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Gilbert.
Yes, good day. Gilbert Siko from the South African Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, where I manage a portfolio for marine and polar research and also serve as a vice chair for IOC Africa. For us, this is very much important. Accessibility is important, particularly for Africa, because it enhances the way we are able to contribute and measure different variables, because being dependent on the global north to acquire the technology, it creates a problem, it creates a challenge. Hence, ultimately, because of that, we are able to, if let's say we have accessibility to infrastructure, in this case, it means that we will be meaningfully be able to contribute to our ocean observation broadly. But then with the limitations in this case, sometimes if we have I think linking to the previous question in terms of the cost of sensors, in this case, it's important because sometimes there is a perception that if they are lower cost, it means now the quality will be low. Hence, ultimately, the accessibility in this case, it's important to ensure that broadly high quality is also brought into the global south. Thank you.
Thanks, Gilbert. Patrick G., you had your hand up and went down. Do you want to join in? I was going to call on you next.
Yeah, well, I can introduce myself, Patrick Orange, at the Swedish Meteorological and Hydrological Institute. I'm also here representing the Global Ocean Observing System, GOOS. Everyone's covering everything I have on my list here. That's the thing. But I would also echo Amy and Alexis quite a lot there when it gets to the coastal zones, and it's all about increased spatial and temporal coverage and resolution in the coastal zones, and also it provides the means to engage citizens much more to help us out with ocean observations. Thanks.
Thanks, Patrick. Okay, we'll go to Andrew and then Tosta.
All right, thank you. You're having me speak again. I want to echo what Amy and Alexis said, and also I'm gonna put on a different hat because I'm also an elected official in my local community. I'm the Commissioner of Climate Change, which is an objectively hilarious title. But we had just to give a real world example of some of the things that I've seen from this is that, you know, these kinds of technologies also help build trust in the community when the community feels like they have ownership over the data. I see that Zach Johnson is on the call as well from SOFAR. We actually worked with SOFAR a couple of years ago to put in a tide buoy to monitor coastal flooding in our community. And the difference in responses from our constituents when we talk about increased coastal flooding based on projections from NOAA and NOAA's tide buoy in another town, you know, several dozen miles away, versus when we say like, our tide gauge says the town is flooding this much every year. The difference in how our constituents respond to that data and see it as an urgent need is night and day. So having these tools in communities where the community is in control of not just the tool, but the way the data is produced and disseminated, I think builds a tremendous amount of trust in the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. Totally agree with that. Tosta.
So following up a little with what Patrick was saying about citizen science, accessible technology means that the technology can be deployed on a lot of platforms and not just scientific platforms, non-scientific infrastructure. And I think we can look at what the meteorologists do, the WMO. They think about a reference network with high quality, very accurate and precise measurements, and a comprehensive network that has slightly less demands on quality and precision, but can cover the big gaps in space and time, because I think space and time is the big issue in the ocean. We don't cover that. It's better to have a broader network that you can tie to a reference network, and this broader network can then, doesn't have to have the highest quality. So I think the benefit is obvious that we can fill these gaps in time and space by having accessible technology. Yeah, I think that's my point.
Thank you. Patrick, you want to wrap this question up?
Just follow up there with what Tosta said. We're not necessarily chasing the decimals anymore, as we did in the past. We still need that, but we need this kind of new technology to really get more observations in, because that is what we're lacking.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to now jump towards what was touched on with some of the under-observed regions, but looking at accessible platforms and how do they address specific gaps in the global south and some other under-monitored regions, whether those be remote or deeper regions. Zach.
Hey there. My name is Zach. Thanks for the shout out there, Andrew. I appreciate it. I'm an engineer at SOFAR Ocean. We're the creators of the spotter buoy and the operator of the largest private global ocean weather sensor network built on top of that spotter. I'm also the community manager for Bristlemouth. We'll talk about that later, but focusing on spotter. One thing we've noticed in particularly in sales, we are seeing sort of, I guess, in light of some of the challenges with the United States federal government and kind of the instability of access to reliable weather data, we're seeing a lot of smaller nations take ownership of their own metocean measurements and forecasting. In the context of Spotter, this kind of lower cost metocean buoy, we're seeing some customers develop networks kind of using that in concert with other accessible ocean technologies to establish these kind of homegrown regional and somewhat larger than regional networks. And I think this is a trend we're going to see more and more. If you have a browser open, you can check out backyardbuoys.com, and this is kind of like a really nice prototype of how this could work in concert with other larger organizations that are out there. But some folks are just kind of paving the way and kind of going on their own and breaking out from the traditional methods of doing it. And that is all for now.
Great. Thanks, Zach. I'll go with Katie and then Brendan.
I am Katie Sokolsky. I'm the CEO of a company called Campy. We build software for shrimp aquaculture. So a bit of a different approach than maybe some of the others on this call. We focus on aquaculture because we think that if we can help to enable land-based cultivation, it can help to alleviate some of the stress that fishing has on our own oceans. I mean, to this question, we operate almost entirely in the global south. It's where all of the shrimp is farmed in the world. We had initially started with a hardware product because that met the needs of kind of shrimp farmers we were working with, and we found that there was accessibility challenges around both having the cost and the maintenance around that. So we spent several years trying to figure out how to have a more accessible software-based product. It's not as robust as what we were able to do before, but it's allowed us to drastically expand the reach of who we can work with in a way that we can even remotely bring people into our platform. And what has been exciting for me around that is that if I look at other aquaculture spaces like salmon, for example, a lot of the technology that's been deployed there is really only leveraged by the largest and most affluent producers. And shrimp, for example, is a species in which the majority of production is really small scale coastal farmers. And I think thinking through, not just how we access and support the most affluent and advanced people, but really if we want to move the needle on a lot of these metrics, I think many of us here are working on, we have to think about creating access both financially and also making it less difficult for someone to onboard to whatever we're trying to do. So we've been trying to move away from hardware. We had a whole bunch of challenges around global shipping and maintenance and all of these things that everyone else on this call have talked about, to looking at how can we get this information and support the goals without hardware investment.
Great. Thanks, Katie. Brendan.
Hi there, everyone. Brendan Carter. I'm here from the Cooperative Institute for Climate Ocean Ecosystem Studies at the University of Washington. I think I'm pinch hitting today as a last-minute replacement for some of our federal colleagues at NOAA who unfortunately can't be here due to the shutdown. I want to chime in on this question, less or more about the kind of remote and deeper regions and undersampled regions. I come to these set of questions associated with focused on the kind of global fluxes of carbon into and out of the ocean. And I just wanted to highlight that there are some big changes going on in how we observe the ocean due to low cost and accessible sensors and platforms. One example being biogeochemical Argo is kind of undergoing a build out right now that is giving us information that we never had before on timetables that we could never access for a subset of the measurements that we routinely make and we previously could only make on ships. Similarly, when we talk about carbon fluxes into and out of the ocean, one of the big questions is focused around the Southern Ocean. The observations that we have down there have left us with a lot of questions. And there's a new Schmidt Sciences Virtual Institute that is going to be putting PCO2 sensors on some autonomous platforms that are going to go down there and make measurements in the Southern Ocean during the Southern Hemisphere's winter, which is a definitely highly undersampled portion of the globe. And then finally, I also wanted to note that there's some new technology coming online these days associated with autonomous profiling vehicles that are allowing us to get coastal profiles of information for anything that we have a sensor for. And that's opening up a lot of new applications with respect to, for example, monitoring marine carbon dioxide removal deployments that are happening in the coastal ocean. So I just want to say there's a lot of new opportunities being created in the space by kind of new accessible technologies and especially sensor platforms. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Brendan. So I'm gonna move. Oh, Patrick, you want a quick comment?
Quick comment is that when attending various conferences in the Global South, is a lot of discussion is on knowledge transfer, that there's not necessarily that we have to buy devices from the shelf, but actually try to transfer that knowledge more locally so that we can build sensors more locally and regionally, and by that lower the cost even more.
Great. I'm gonna now jump to the last question we had in this session, and you started down this path with these last answers, but really, what is the value or the return on that investment for the increased data that we get from these under-observed regions? How can we quantify that from the perspective of value? Zach, I think you touched on it a little bit with the island nations taking a little more ownership of their mid-ocean data, but what are some other thoughts and strategies for calculating that? Alexi.
Again, so there's a bunch of societal returns, right, that comes with accessible technology, better disaster preparedness. I mean, speaking from Africa, out of the, I think, top 40 predicted worst hit country in the world, 33 are in Africa. Massive. And obviously not discounting all the island states, you know, that are getting engulfed by sea level rise. Fisheries management is a big one too, and understanding, seeing the impact that you're having if you, as a community, again, speaking of communities, but not only communities, you know, you are putting a lot of effort, investment, not fishing and diverting efforts somewhere else so you can see the fisheries replenish and whatnot. Having the almost real-time data of seeing that effort bringing to fruition is motivational. It's really making a huge difference in sort of driving the change and providing community empowerment, because then again they can own a little bit better the data and the fate that's coming at them. So there's a bunch of societal returns beyond just the financial ROI that needs to be stressed here, I think.
Great. No, good point to be made. We'll go Gilbert and then Leif.
Yes, thank you. I think without repeating what Alexia said, I think most importantly, I think this will assist with decision support. I think, as we all know, in the broad African regions, without this kind of data and knowledge, it becomes late. The response is always late as compared to being responsive and proactive. In this case, if we have the capacity, we have the data, it becomes much easier for decisions to be made. Thank you.
And Leif.
Yes, I think so. In terms of measuring the value, if you look at particular use cases of businesses, okay, we can talk in general about societal needs, but if you go, you know, specifically in on certain use cases, let's say aquaculture, if you extend the notion of sustainability to also be a sustainable business, you need to look at what factors, biological factors in the ocean impacts your business. So algae blooms can be lice and so on, all kind of things that can be a risk factor in your business. So if there's a way then to measure the successfulness of these operators in the ocean space, that could be a way to measure the value, because it does have a very specific value. If you are bankrupt because algae bloom, okay, we can detect that and log that as a fact then.
Right. Thank you. We'll go Kate and then Katie, and then we'll wrap up this session number 1.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on something that Gilbert said about decision making. And of course, in many cases, more data or the right data enables better decision making, and not just better and more responsive decision making, but also more nimble decision making, especially if we're talking about real-time data, which I think is increasingly going to need to be prioritized in a very rapidly changing coastal and ocean environment. I also want to note, however, that, at least in public decision making, there are a lot of stages between data and decision, right? And so that probably also needs to be considered. We have this theory of change that more information means better decisions. And empirically, that is not always the case. And I'm sure we can all think of examples where we have lots of information, but we keep making bad decisions. So, we should be careful about oversimplifying that connection. Although in many cases, of course, that is absolutely true. There's lots of cases in which there are other considerations. Thank you.
Great. Katie.
Yeah, I think the point around bringing back to either economic livelihood or employment livelihood is very important. There's a great use case in Ecuador, which is the main market we work in, where it's not in the industry I'm in, but where the crab fishermen got together. They realized that their stocks were depleting due to the water quality health around there, and they banded together and planted, a huge amount of mangrove restoration. There's all kinds of groups around the world that are, trying to do mangrove restoration. It's a great way to sequester carbon, but really having that so tightly linked into prosperity, livelihood, and if you're a multi-generational person who's earning your livelihood through this, understanding like the direct correlation between that. We've been doing some interesting work around understanding specifically like with mangroves and improving your resilience as a farmer to coastal events and things like that, and really trying to tie that in through case studies or examples into like economic impact, and helping people to understand that my belief is that ultimately if you're talking with an individual whose livelihood is tied to what they're doing, they will often not be motivated by altruism, but really around their own, resilience and stability. And so I think the more we can link and find ways to very clearly articulate economic or resilient or lower risk benefits or greater market access benefits around items that the global science community has determined to be good for ocean outcome overall, I think that the stronger the buy-in will be, and the work we're doing with farmers, it's all of the activities are really driven by the producers themselves. So we're not really kind of coming in and saying, hey, we're forcing this on you. It's really very pull and driven from them, because they understand this connection between lower risk and improved financial livelihoods by farming in a more resilient and sustainable manner. And so we've done a lot of work really to tie in economic benefit to better practices. And I think without that, it's going to be very difficult to really get very far in general.
Yeah. No, great points. And I think a perfect way to wrap up this session. Right now, we're going to get just a short 5-minute break. So if you want to go stretch your legs, get a cup of coffee, we'll come back at 21 after the hour and see you in just a little bit. Okay, let's get started with this second session today. Give everyone a chance to jump on. All right. So I'm going to kick off section 2 now, and looking at emerging technologies and abilities to change the way we can either reduce cost or increase capability by orders of magnitude. So let's examine emerging technologies that can do this, dramatically reduce the cost of sensors and platforms by orders of magnitude, while expanding observational risk and capability, reach and capability. And it was noted in the use case, these developments are critical towards meeting rising global demand for ocean data, from which the output has been relatively stagnant over the last 5 years. So how can market development and both public and private investment support advancing interoperability and multi-purpose sensors along with driving innovation, all leading towards a forward-looking and value-driven ocean community? And so I'm going to kick this off with our first question to the group, and that is, what are the barriers to adopting other types of technologies, whether that's microchips, integrated chips, or other? Patrick Catalina.
Yes, we think some of the barriers in adopting these technologies include withstanding harsh weather conditions and corrosion, power reliability, and dependency to offshore supply chains, especially in the global south, and also limited technical capacity. Without addressing these challenges, chip-based sensing systems might not be sustainable.
Okay. Thanks, Patrick. Let's go with Sander next, and then Sanket.
Thanks, Hans. Sander from Satlink. So what I wanted to comment is I hear a lot about costs. I hear a lot of capacity building within communities, etc. But I think one of the barriers also is the time to market, because decision processes are so long that if I'm a private investor and I need to convince my board that we need to invest in something that maybe in 3 years will have a signature on a contract, they're lost. Right? So I think the time to market needs to be a lot quicker to take these barriers out and to be able to introduce new technologies in ocean data.
Okay. Thanks, Sander. Sanket?
I think deploying, first let me introduce myself. I'm Sanket. I'm the founder and CEO of Dirac Labs, which is developing navigation technologies using quantum sensors. So I think that deploying any of these newer sensors and other modalities in something like ocean, it is challenging, right? Like you need to have high reliability at the same time, low power, and also that should not require a lot of bandwidth to transmit data. And by the nature of it, it's like harder to develop sensors, processors, computing nodes, and whatnot that fit all of these requirements. And at the end of the day, they need to be low cost as well. And that's like the biggest challenge to make things work in such a remote platform.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Yi and then Katie.
Yeah, thank you. One of the barriers, of course, is the funding. Because of the time to market is so long, a lot of the private investment doesn't have that long horizon to support this kind of a transition. I think it will be really helpful for founders, like particularly the public government programs, to separate the operational fund support, deploy data analysis and scientific exploration versus more transition funding, identify those part of money to support early adopters and then to mature the technology, because it's almost like a chicken egg problem. Like the sensor is less mature, it cannot be funded, and then without the funding, you cannot be mature, reach a maturity to be qualified for the operational fund or the scientific funding. So it's really helpful for founder to separate those funds and to identify the gap and to allocate more resources to help the transition from development to operation.
Yeah, good points. Katie and then Andre.
Yeah, I think there's been some great points raised around, like, I think one of the biggest barriers is this funding and capital structure. We're venture capital based. There are very few venture capital firms globally that have a deep enough understanding of the ocean or aquaculture space to make early stage investments. Like, investment decisions are often made either in a space that a principal understands very deeply, so they're able to analyze something at an early stage to say, yes, I could see how this was going to be very successful, or at a later stage when something is proven out and you're just looking for capital to grow your revenue. And I think in the ocean space specifically, there are a few VCs that have come up, which like Ocean 14 or Aquaspark, which have been helpful. But a lot of what many of us are doing could have huge potential, but is going to need a longer time horizon, both to develop the technology and then also if we're working with individuals, drive that kind of change management, adoption, changing practices of how people are operating. And so it really has to look for, I think to drive the space forward, we need economically minded investors who understand that kind of longer time horizon and can also go deep enough to understand the space where they can take a bet on things earlier on in a way that not every company will be successful, but they can fund to be part of those that are successful, like other more traditional VC spaces.
Yeah, I think I heard this term last week in more patient capital in supporting that time frame.
Yeah, more patient. And maybe actually one more point is that also that it's patient, but also a bit of a deviation from the traditional VC model where you're looking for like a $1 billion unicorn. Like a lot of the VC money is really they'll invest in, 100 companies. You're looking for the one that's going to be huge. This idea of, what if you invested in smaller, more thoughtful companies and, maybe it's a $50 million company or something like that, but they don't have to be kind of a unicorn to achieve that. And then also impact aligned investing, I think, is another really interesting space that we're just kind of seeing the start of that really come to fruition, hopefully.
Yes. Andre, then Kevin, and then Leif.
Hi all, my name's Andre. I'm an engineer at Sea Technology Services in Cape Town. We're a small oceanographic engineering company. I see a lot of familiar faces. The one thing I've picked up in some of the projects we work on with new technology is, especially in the academic research field, sometimes can be extremely conservative, and it's very hard to change the way they've done things. There's sort of a brand loyalty that's a hard nut to crack. You need to qualify your sensor against some gold standard and breed a bit of trust there. Yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
Great. Thanks, Andre. Kevin?
Yeah, thank you. Kevin O'Brien. I'm at the University of Washington. I work with Brendan Carter. I'm also the Goose Observations Coordination Group Vice Chair for Data. So I'm coming at this from a data perspective. And I know that there are a lot of barriers to developing these new technologies, but once they're implemented, one of the barriers is, being able to trust the data and understand the data that's coming off of these sensors and off of these chips. Are there biases? What does that data mean? And so I think, having complete documentation, complete metadata, and having trust in that data is a barrier to adopting. And I just wanted to point out that side of the aisle.
Yeah, no, good point. Leif and then Brendan.
Yeah, to what Kevin said, I can just second that. Metadata, is extremely important to be able to leverage the data in a good way, especially if you also have now, let's say, a whole variety of sensors and of different qualities, different price points, etc. You need to know what was the context when the particular data set was collected. I was going to comment though on the funding cycles. My observation is that it's shockingly short funding cycles, and then you build something, and what happens after those 3 years, or you turn it off. It's such a waste. So when you first start building an infrastructure, okay, we need to look at a much longer term there, which will create a room for innovation. The other point is this industry is very small compared to other industries. So when it comes to chip manufacturing and so on, I would recommend going much more with standard open standards. I mean, there's a difference, order of magnitude difference when you talk to semiconductors and so on, millions, tens of millions of units, and what do we talk about? Thousands. So keep that in mind. Don't build any special hardware or software for that matter. Use open standards wherever possible.
Mm-hmm. No, good point. Brendan.
I just wanted to quickly pile on, I think, the last three speakers. We were, as academia, accused of having some brand loyalty, and I think that's accurate. Part of the reason why is just for many applications, a consistent bias across a whole data set is something that we can handle pretty effectively. But if the bias, even if it shrinks, if it keeps jumping around and being different, that means that the way we handle the data has to be much more nuanced, and the value of the whole data product can be decreased by that. So to some degree, that is a barrier, and that we kind of have to reconfigure everything every time we implement a new technology. Thanks.
Great. All right, I'm going to close off question 1 now, and we're going to move on to second question here, and that is building off what some of the comments we had in the first discussion. Is there sufficient market information available to attract interest, from a startup community in observing and monitoring technology? And if not, what is the specific market information or reports that are needed? Sander and then Yi.
Well, I can only speak on my own behalf, perhaps, but my simple answer would be no. There's not enough market information available. And that is partly because, in my experience and in my opinion, a lot of the market information that is available is kind of extrapolated from the past, which is not the same as what is about to happen in the coming 5 to 10 years. And so you can download a report about ocean monitoring instrumentation, but it doesn't capture the market that you're looking for necessarily. So, and that's always the case in a startup community, but I think the short answer for me would be no, there's not enough market information available at the moment.
Yeah, and no forward lens.
And no forward lens, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, Yi.
Yeah, I agree. There's definitely a need for more market information intelligence, especially looking forward, as we emphasize the blue economy, the blue tech is emerging. So we have to provide more evidence to the founders, particularly the private capital investors. For example, they don't want to see blue economy is $1 trillion business, and that's way too vague and a high level. We need that dig in much deeper, different segment, different sectors. And then I agree with the previous speaker, it doesn't have to be unicorn as a big market, but have a healthy industry market size. Doesn't have to be $1 trillion or even $1 billion market. You can be a good business for 100 million revenue, or even tens of millions. So we need to be more provide more detailed information. Is very educational to the investors who are not familiar with the blue economy, our industry. So more information is needed for sure.
Yeah, and if I can thread in just a little more on that, I like where you're all headed, and perhaps next couple of hands can also embed this. But we're saying a lot about needing more specific information. Are there examples of what has been working and where those are coming from? And then we can use that in terms of our recommendation about where we could look to develop further opportunities. So are there some success examples that would help us in terms of determining some better pathways? And we'll start with Katie and then Alexi, and then I'll go back to you, Yi.
Yeah, I think ultimately if we're trying to, I think ultimately to be successful, we have to attract private capital that is economically motivated. And so there's the impact side of it. There's the people, there's the funds that are focused on the blue economy, but really most of those individuals are ultimately, making investments for economic reasons. And I think one of the challenges in this space is that there's technological risk, there's solution risk, but then there's also a risk around demand and then the value of that demand in many cases. And so in our example, we created essentially the first operating platform for a shrimp farm, which is a $65 billion industry, but it just didn't exist. But for us to be able to convince people to give us money, we had to understand kind of the economic drivers of farmers and convince people that there was a willingness to pay and an appetite, and that the total market of investing money in what we were doing would ultimately yield a return. And that took us many years. Like that data wasn't out there. It involved me like interviewing farmers one-on-one to get that. But I think if there was this a way for whether it's other private companies that indicate, here are the problems I have, if someone can solve these types of problems, here is the economic opportunity that would unlock for me, which would create kind of this demand pull and an understanding of like what the economic opportunity of solving those problems is. But I think that's a big challenge for us in the industry right now, is this technological risk, but also economic demand risk without full clarity on who is willing to pay what and how many of those people there are to come up with your TAM essentially for your startup.
Yeah, good, very good point. Alexi, you want to add on to that?
I mean, the TAM conversation, right? I think I believe I understand that to attract startups or entrepreneurs in a particular space, there should be funding, but the best entrepreneurs often have bootstrapped everything, from the ground up. So before even the funding comes, I think that you need customer, customer base, customer segment, identify them. Maybe there's a report that says, okay, these are all the organizations around the world, the type of customers that would be willing to pay for data, and observation data, and this is a particular price. I mean, you can't really put a price tag on it because it varies a lot, but there needs to be an idea or a concept of how much what would be the price point, and is that price point aligned with the cost of sales, production, marketing, delivery, and whatnot. This is what usually drives entrepreneurs into building a startup, but that's not it. There needs to be a bit of funding, but also good entrepreneurs or successful entrepreneurs are usually calculated risk takers, resourceful people, good communicators that are humble, take feedback, lateral thinkers, and that have grit and passion, right? These 6 traits. I mean, so grit and passion usually comes from people that are experiencing the pain itself. So maybe for those who are experiencing the pain of lack of ocean data or observation data in the ocean space, they don't tick all of the other boxes. A lot of us come from academia and have a scientific background. It's not usually enough to be a good entrepreneur. So perhaps advertising the problem, for lack of a better word, and the customer base that would be willing to pay for it, could really help attract more startup into that space.
Great, thank you. Yi.
Yeah, I think our community can organize better, become a strong, have a strong identity. Blue tech, ocean tech doesn't really have a home in the private investment community. Maybe climate tech is a good example. Many years ago, as they emerge as its own thing, if you pitch into a climate startup, you'll just claim, I'm the climate tech. Everybody understand, the investor understand. And then I know it's difficult in the recent year or so, but then the new example, successful example, is a defense tech. And then 5 years ago, very few investors interested in defense tech. Now, at least in the US, defense tech is emerging. There's many unicorns, a lot of success examples. So how do we organize ourselves, have an identity, have a success example, so investor will recognize, oh, here's a blue tech community I want to invest. So I was a blue tech investor, things like that. So we can organize better, become a community.
showing more successful pilots or whatever that might be. Yeah, okay, I like that. Okay, I'm gonna close off discussion on number 2, and we're gonna shift gears just a little bit in our next question, and that is looking at enablers like quantum navigation and how they change the landscape of ocean sensors. How can these technologies transform ocean observing while also addressing the technology barriers that limit their effectiveness? And Senket, I was hoping you'd be the first to raise your hand, so go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the key factors behind like something like quantum navigation, where at least what we do is we use magnetic maps and models to essentially navigate without relying on something like GPS. And it's right now today it's like a chicken or egg problem where okay, you can't really navigate without having high quality maps, and by quality I mean like high spatial and temporal resolution. And because you don't have maps, then you don't have enough like sensors and modules to navigate. So a good way to really solve this could be essentially low cost sensors that are deployed at scale and having the ability to collect that entire data set and make it available through a global database, right? So today, NOAA makes and maintains the World Magnetic Model. But again, it doesn't have enough spatial resolution for, at least for our purposes, of course, works really well for a lot of applications. But I think having the ability to create a network of sensors, with some amount of edge compute capability, so you're not like having a high bandwidth communication requirement, but at the end of the day, collect all of that data, process it into a map or a model that's updated more frequently. For example, the World Magnetic Model gets updated every 5 years, which can be great for like high spatial resolution applications. But say you want to really, navigate in a city or whatever, you really want like, updates over like a few hours or something like that. And I think today's technology can make that happen with a lot of changes in AI and whatnot. So I think that's something very exciting for us at Dirac Labs to be working on.
Great, thank you. Leif.
Yeah, so when it comes to quantum tech, I mean, there's obviously still a lot to be said and done there. But if you look at then, quantum navigation, quantum sensors, you can get better precision, not necessarily cheaper immediately, but you also get resilience, more resilient systems. And one thing to maybe take from Kongsberg's background, we have a global situation, a security situation that is driving a lot of funding into, let's say, military research and development. And typically what you see, there can be such developments that derive new technologies and drive them much harder, faster. And then there will be spin-offs that will be more of civilian use coming in the aftermath of that. So we're not talking about necessarily a lot cheaper tech right out of the gate here, but downstream, definitely, I would think that would be the case, specifically on the quantum technologies.
Great, thank you. Patrick. Got you on mute, Patrick.
Sorry about that. There's a good comment in the chat from Andres there. I just wanted to point that one out because that's something that I hear a lot when talking to sensor developers is that they do develop sensors, but they don't necessarily know the needs from the oceanographic community. So there needs to be a better communication between these two communities, I think.
Mm-hmm. Great, Tosta.
Yeah, in addition to that, I think it's very important that when your sensors and your technology is being developed, that you think about interoperability aspects. How can you, make a observing or measurement system of different sensors in easy plug and play world? That's going to really increase accessibility and usefulness of that technology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that's an important aspect. Keep the interoperability.
Thank you. Sander.
I just wanted to respond to Patrick because it resonates quite heavily, to be honest. And I think we continue to see the scientific community as something totally different or in isolation from the private market players, and we should not. And I hope an initiative like this, or the reason for ourselves to participate in an initiative like this, is to bring these worlds together, because sometimes they don't even know, Patrick, that they exist. Right? So it's such a waste, and that's very unfortunate. So I just wanted to comment that I 100% agree with it.
All right. Well, I'm going to go to our final discussion prompt for this section. And this is really looking at what are the good examples of how these emerging technologies can ensure accessibility and or low-cost alternatives that do not compromise data quality or reliability. And we touched on that a little bit, but I'd like to build that conversation out a little bit more. Amy.
So I wanted to bring up something I was just aware of, and I feel like if our NOAA colleagues were on today, they may talk about this, but there's a NOAA water level observation network that's part of the global water sensing network in terms of sea level rise. And as we know, weather is different than climate. And so the stations that they have out there are pretty costly to maintain, and like they're not everywhere. And so there's a cost-effective system. It's an ultrasonic radar that those sensors, they're like solid state sensors, they can do real-time data. And there's hundreds of them now being put sort of across scale. And this isn't just in the US, right? But it's one example in our EEZ. So, and they're also part of the ocean observing system, our national ocean observing system. And so that's that means now they're like right next to the gold standard of data coming in, but now we have more of these lower cost sensors to get real-time data for weather and all the flooding events that might happen. And so that's a really good example of not replacing something, but just like complementing another gold standard system. And
Yi, and then Leif.
Yeah, one of the good example, my experience working with the sensor companies is many of these emerging anti-bifouling technologies, either the mechanical, optical, and so forth. So really increase lifetime of the sensors. This is especially important for autonomous sensors. You cannot send the sensor back to the manufacturing to clean and recalibrate. So reducing bifouling in the ocean, increase the lifetime of the sensors, and then reduce the cost of the data collection and make it more accessible. So that's one of the many emerging technology I can think of related to my area.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Leif.
Yeah, so I see also in chat here, several mentioned AI. And I think if you want to reduce the cost, remove the human. So fully automated systems wherever you can is absolutely crucial. And as an example, I think the question was about an example. So I know in Norway, IMR in Bergen have quite a big effort on reducing the usage of the bigger RVs and replacing that with uncrewed system vessels, and also deploying machine learning algorithms for acoustic processing of acoustic data. So in the end, when they get that to be fully tested, I believe that they will take down the cost significantly from comparing to running with larger vessels.
Great, thank you. Yi again.
Yeah, another example by reading the chat talk about the data transmission The Iridium satellite communication has been developing next generation communication is 10x data faster transmission and then maybe 20 times cheaper than the traditional one, especially you have more data intensive sensors you want to transmit. For example, one of our customers pay $1,000 per month Iridium bill by transmitting acoustic data. So that's already processed the data, not to mention the raw data. So you're difficult to bring them back, especially in the coastal applications, maybe exploring other communication technologies, radios, and then other mechanism, so reduce the data transmission cost. So that's adding to the sensors, platforms, and then data transmission. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for adding that in. So I'm going to go Sander, Patrick, and Andrew, and then we'll wrap this second discussion section.
Thanks, Hans. Maybe jumping on also what Guy was saying in terms of better technology, communication technology, etc., etc. I think the positioning of emerging technologies is always quite relative. I think we also should not at least close our eyes for repurposing existing technologies, or at least technologies that have been successfully applied in other industries, like in my case for fishing, for example. So it might not be the latest and greatest in the ocean data sector, but it might have been developed for another purpose, and we can bring that to the ocean data. So it doesn't have to be the newest of the newest, is more my point. And I think otherwise we just close the door to many more low-hanging fruit than we realize.
Patrick?
Yeah, Sander, I'll say a little bit more on that one, and also go to the chat and look at there's a link there from Emily, my colleague. I just want to say that also we have making use of already existing platforms such as the Fishing Vessel Ocean Observing Network that is using fishing vessels all over the world and putting sensors on the nets that then collects data in a very easy way and very, very cost efficient way to make more ocean observations.
Thanks, Patrick. Andrew, wrap us up.
I was going to say the exact same thing that Sander and Patrick raised, and also emphasize that, also keep an eye out for cross-pollination among industries that aren't necessarily ocean industries. So our main sensor supplier for my project is actually a hydroponics company that develops sensors for agricultural use. And because that is such a much larger industry than anything we're working on, their ability to scale is just so much greater than ours, and so the price goes down quite a bit. I'd also like, as an example, there's Educational Passages, which is an NGO that makes wind-driven drifters for tracking and to look at currents and wind regimes. And they just use, instead of building their own satellite system, they just use the modules that come on container tracking applications, which are, in terms of cost, one of the cheapest ways you can get satellite tracking onto an ocean-going device.
All right. Well, again, thanks everyone. It was a very good discussion. I think we covered an enormous amount of material in just those 4 questions. Right now, let's do another short 5-minute break. We'll get into our last curated session with the panelists, after which we will then assemble the entire observers with our panelists for some final questions and thoughts. So I'll see everyone at the top of the hour. welcome everybody for this third section, looking at expanding global observations. I'll wait for everyone to get cameras back on and we'll get started in just a couple of seconds. All right. So again, thanks everyone. Very good discussion across the board so far. And in this last section of specific curated questions and dialogue, we'll discuss, before we open it up to all observers, we're going to look at how we explore strategies to expand and optimize global ocean observations, particularly in underobserved or unexplored areas like coastal or remote regions, where information is often essential for understanding broader ocean processes, where availability is an issue, whether that is cost-driven limitations or simply not the optimal pathway forward given the requirements for the region. These are areas that underpin biodiversity, fisheries, tourism, while buffering communities from environmental impacts like sea level rise or storm surge. Many observing initiatives remain scientifically driven rather than demand-driven, leading to data gaps, inconsistent access, and funding challenges that hinder sustained service delivery. So this portion of our dialogue will emphasize how innovation across the ocean information value chain, from sensor and platform design to data processing and beyond, can lower barriers to participation and expand observational coverage, aligning with observational strategies, improving interoperability, fostering inclusive, scalable systems that address both scientific and operational needs. So with that, I'm going to kick the question off with, how can we identify opportunities to fast-track promising technologies in an efficient and standardized way? And this was brought up in a few of the comments in our last section, but creating an interface that allows innovation and a mature market to work together. So I'll open it up to the group with that first discussion. Okay, we'll start with Amy and then we'll go to Tosta.
I'll take a stab at this. We chatted about this yesterday. I think what we found, it just with us is looking for new emerging technologies, is there's so many of them out there now, and we don't even know who's out there, and just identifying them first rather than this fast tracking of them. It's just finding out who's out there, identifying them, and then removing some of those barriers to getting them into like testing and connecting them to folks who might use them. And so for us, that's the bigger issue, is before you can even fast track them, you just need to remove some barriers and just make sure they they're known.
Great, thank you. Tosta.
I think I would like to take a step back there and look at the requirement setting first, and looking at what you need to observe, the variables and where and when, and accuracy, precision, that kind of stuff. And Goose has done the good work there in identifying essential ocean variables that defines that. And I would say that we are looking at, or people are looking at, the UV concept now to make it more geared towards the needs of agencies and authorities, but also towards the needs of the blue economy. I think it was a little bit science driven, when Goose took that step forward on the UVs more than 10 years ago. So looking at the UVs, and then that gives you really a framework to see what variables do we need, do the economy need or the market need, and then you can start looking at technologies that can serve that need. And I think what we have said here, finding the right technology in that plethora of different technologies is actually a challenge. So that's my input. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Let's go to VG next.
Hi, everyone. I'm VG fellow at L3 Harris, but prior to that, I was a chief architect at Qualcomm Technologies. So I'm coming in with a wireless and a sensor and edge AI background. So with that in mind, just listening to the conversation, there is a lot of advancement both in the wireless and the AI ecosystems. A lot of it has to do with consumer-based technologies or enterprise technologies, growing the enterprise, whether it is quality management or just basically environmental management. And the commercial ecosystems have successfully applied the technologies into those applications. Whatever you hear as you use your device, right? You have your device, whatever is being developed is getting more and more concentrated and standardized. And so these open interfaces, as one of the panelists described, is becoming available. So if you can see certain capabilities that is available on your device, rest assumed that you could actually have these kind of capabilities going into IoT devices, including ocean sensors. And the proliferation of the satellite communication, as you might be hearing about Starlink and the ability to communicate emergency messaging, all of that is becoming available for regions that were not covered before by communications. So those are some of the up and coming technologies that you're observing already that you could start to like dig deeper into and understand how it could be transformed into addressing the problems described here.
No, great. I appreciate that. Great point on the more macro opportunity for those technologies to support everything else. Gilbert, I'll go to you next, and then Katie.
Yes, thank you. For us, I think most importantly in South Africa, what we looked at is in this case was to ensure that we focus on the next gen. I think as next generation, as you've seen, I think we had previously that there is a brand loyalty in terms of certain instrumentations. So most importantly, if you workshop and then basically enlighten and provide capacity development to the new generation in terms of how to utilize these new technologies, I think you're getting early buy-in and diverse thinking in terms of using varied instrumentation as compared to those that are inaccessible, because some of them are very high cost. So in most cases, institutions like Scion has started workshopping in different platforms, in conferences and in meetings, new technologies to say these are emerging low cost, but then ensuring that low cost as well does not necessarily mean low quality. I think that's one of the things that has to be highlighted, that low cost doesn't necessarily mean low quality. So this is basically how the strategies that we apply to sort of like interface to the new generation researchers. Thank you.
Thanks, Gilbert. Katie, then Patrick.
I think there's been some good discussion in the chat earlier on around, there's the concept of low cost, but also the concept of ROI, like the return. And so understanding both the benefits and kind of the cost to achieve that. I think if we think about fast tracking, there's kind of the academic route, but then also thinking about finding like co-creation industry partners who are looking to solve specific areas, and then even potentially shifting or evolving scope of a problem to meet kind of like an initial MVP or use case around that. We initially started working with like all 70 different marine species, and then we kind of honed in that there was kind of this great fit within shrimp for a whole bunch of different reasons, and that evolved kind of our offering and what we were trying to do. And so I think as an industry, if we can find industry partners, and that takes both willingness of industry partners to support this type of work and to invest in innovation, but then also identifying their kind of specific needs to say, okay, let's try, a single use case and then a second use case and a third use case and building from there. That hopefully over time that can build to something larger and kind of expedite how we can bring new technology to the forefront.
Okay. Thanks, Katie. Patrick.
Thanks. I just want to echo Amy, but also point to both Sander and Jeetan in the chat, because I think that's key that we identify these technologies and that we create a marketplace where they can be seen, where we can, a true marketplace. Now, we've done that. We have a Ocean Decade action that we call Scoop. There's the link in the chat, solutions for cost-effective ocean observation platform. And we are building that one together with the Synchro people here on the chat. So I think that's a bit of a key that we really get the marketplace ready.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. All right, we're going to move on to the next question, and that is, how can we ensure accessible technologies empower both a range of users that would include non-specialists like citizen science while maintaining scientific rigor? And if people can point towards some good examples that they have been part of, that would be helpful in this conversation. Sander.
Yeah, thanks. And maybe I'm preaching to the converted here, but I think this is so fundamental in some of the previous questions that we had as well. If we cannot explain to a multitude of non-specialist users the value that ocean data can create for them, we will never cross that barrier or that hurdle, so to say. So I think it's storytelling. It's an exciting story to tell, and we need to do that not only within the science community, but especially out there. Right? So I think we all need to go on a road trip and do that storytelling, so to say, because I really think we need to bring it to the communities and to the blue economy stakeholders, because otherwise they will not know. So storytelling for me is fundamental in this.
I like that storytelling road trip. It's a good way to put it.
We can go together.
Yeah. We'll go Kevin, then Zach, and then Katie.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just want to kind of step on the data side of things and talk about, to maintain the scientific rigor, if we can embed that scientific rigor into the sensors or onto the chips to make them do the hard work of documenting and formatting the data, based on open source formats like we mentioned earlier, would be really helpful to ensuring the trust of the data. So things like automated metadata generation, where the sensor itself is, embedding in central context into the data output, that unique ID, calibration information, that would be very helpful. Using standard protocols to transmit the data, back to land stations, et cetera. So, and potentially even doing onboard quality control on the sensor, so that we know if there are flags on bad data coming in. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Zach.
Hey there. Yeah, I think so. I'm an engineer and I'm totally obsessed with the technology, the physics, the chemistry, the ones and zeros. That's where I live. That's my passion. But as both SOFAR Ocean and our spin-out Bristlemouth that I haven't introduced yet, Bristlemouth is a connectivity standard, an open connectivity standard for marine hardware, kind of USB of the ocean. But in both cases, as we move into kind of like concentric circles of different users, that the creating engineer startup in the center, and then like the very outer ring, the casual consumer of the data, or the consumer of something secondary to that data, like a weather report or somebody taking an action based on a weather report. As we move out to the larger population, greater impact, away from the engineers, we find in every case that most people don't care about the sensor. They don't care about the data. They don't care about the technology. And so I think a big part of, kind of coming to terms with that, expanding accessible ocean technology into greater and greater populations, greater and greater impacts, we need to focus more as an industry on the insights that's produced. If the consumer and user of science technology, specifically ocean science technology, are scientists, then this is a different conversation. But if the ultimate end user are governments, everyday citizens, fishermen, people in between, then the insights are really what matter. And I think the companies that are creating these technologies need to be more and more active and more proactive in identifying those insights and creating the total end-to-end, data product. And the kind of the good way to do that is to, be transparent about that and incorporate the good science and the questions and the iterative approach every step of the way. the bad way to do that is just skip to the insight and be like, oh, hand wave, here's this magic insight that you could just take our word for it. And I think all of us are going to struggle with that going forward as we kind of, reach a more distributed, a more democratized approach to data collection and data dissemination. And I think that for me, that's the kind of the ultimate shift in mindset that kind of enables that. Is like, let's get away from ones and zeros and let's move into insights and meaningful impacts. And then let's also maintain transparency throughout that process so that we don't lose what really matters and what we all probably on this call really care about, which is the accuracy and rigor that you mentioned.
Thanks, Zach. Katie.
I'll echo that I think as we go further away from people who understand the rigor of science, if you think about what is the action you're trying to get someone to take based on this information, simplifying that, can be complicated and sometimes even controversial, especially if you're coming from like a rigorous science background. So an ability to continue to capture and record deep data, but if we're trying to get action of someone who is not going to understand the rigor and how to interpret the nuance within that information, thinking about how we simplify that and think about the end goal in mind of if there is a specific action we're trying to take, what is that action? How can we try and influence that in a better way than we do today? And kind of move away from, the perfect can be the enemy of the good around this. We initially started with, there's a lot of science behind, kind of our water quality and things we do. And we initially were giving all that information to our farmers. They felt confused. They didn't understand what to do with it. And so we've simplified all of that. We still collect all of that data, but we simplified it into KPIs, which help them to understand, okay, this is what I need to do. I think like a corollary that's, potentially a controversial example, but one that, I look at is if we think about it like an air quality index, there's a lot of complexity and controversy around how we communicate that. But that is something that the mass global population can have some access of understanding in a way that they can't necessarily access within the details of that. And so again, things had to be lost to do that. There's controversy around how we do it, but if we think about the goal of having mass understanding, we may have to lose some of the nuance to get people to onboard to concepts.
Mm-hmm. Creating our own WQI for the complementary AQI. Yeah.
Yeah, could be. Yeah.
Leif.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if the question is about to engaging a broader, let's say, non-scientific community, and the potential could be as contributors, citizen scientists and so on, then one opportunity would be to look at things like gamification and so on. So at least have some incentive to contribute, and maybe that can get a larger base of data points for in the end scientific use. The other point, what Zach talked about, made a lot of sense too, and also make scientific instrumentation also simpler to use, to take down the skills needed, and we can look at other industries, for that. Compare a Panasonic on RNC mobile phone from 2000 and what you get today. Today, Grandpa is maneuvering quite nicely on that device, and it's a known interface, and that type of work takes some effort, granted, but maybe it's something to strive for.
Great, thank you. We'll wrap this question with Kate.
Thanks. Yeah, I sort of have been, this has been brewing, so I will work with my rough draft thoughts. So Zach was talking about, when you're talking about a broader scientific or non-scientific user community, it's really not about the instrumentation. I would take it a step further, and I would say in a lot of those cases, depending on where you are in that information value chain, it's not even about the data, right? It's actually at that point, it's about, oh, how has the data been interpreted and turned into knowledge, and how is that knowledge being communicated? If you're all the way at the very end and you are just being subjected to decisions made on data, then it's just about the decisions, right? I've heard a lot of people talking about trust, right? And so I I think I'm just trying to push this towards like it, I'm a social scientist. I'm always going to make it bigger, push it towards thinking outside just of this sort of small space of ocean observing into this larger space of like, what are we doing with that data? Where is it going? How is it being used? How is it being communicated? And what does it look like to the people all throughout that value chain? So if you're at the end of that value chain, it's not about whether you trust the data, it's about whether you trust the decision makers or maybe the organization whose name is associated with that data. So we need to be, if we're talking about trying to drive societal change, we need to be working across disciplines to examine all of those components, not just this question about the instrumentation or the data or even the trust in the data, because it goes so far beyond that. Thank you.
No, good points, Kate. And it from my perspective, sort of leads into what I want to ask next, and that is looking at criteria needed to understand whether an accessible sensor is relevant or appropriate to a specific use case. And I think you touched on that from the full spectrum. But what would others think in terms of really looking at that criteria for how a sensor, an accessible sensor, would be the appropriate use for a use case that you've had? Patrick, Catalina.
Yes, I think you would start it with that use case, and then what's the concern, or the question. From there, you could say what type of data or information I needed, thus what kind of sensor is relevant or appropriate, and what are the parameters it can be measured. Is it appropriate for the time or spatial scale? And as it for now is the data being delivered in near real time, so the appropriate decisions can be made.
Thanks, Patrick. Amy.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm going to talk about this because it's probably my least favorite thing, but it seems like it was pointed out to me when people are talking about criteria. If you know about essential ocean variables, right? What are the things that we're all studying that have been voted on by the kind of global ocean observing system, and how to measure those parameters? There's an entire spec sheet that you can go to for each variable and go, oh, this needs this kind of decimal point, this needs this temperature range, whichever. And that's like, you could start there if you wanted to. Kind of a simple spot.
Mm-hmm. And Tosta.
I think it's relatively easy to define what you need for a particular use case in terms of data that need to go in to answer the question set out to answer, and what accuracy, precision, coverage in space and time and all that. But I think we should try also to think about it in an ocean observing system design. That means then when you design measurements, observation for a particular use case, that very often that data can be used for a different use case as well. So we should not just zoom in on one use case, but think a little bit broader and make sure that we can find the synergies between different uses. There are many examples of where we designed an observing system for a particular purpose, and that data would then be very useful for something else. So thinking that in advance is really useful. It makes it a bit more complicated, but at the end of the day, I think we'll be more resilient and stronger by doing that. Thanks.
Thank you. Brandon, we'll wrap this question up with you.
I think Tosta said it very well. I think that's a really important overarching comment. Going back to kind of nitty gritty, some of the important things that help determine whether or not a sensor is applicable include the uncertainty of the measurement. That's the obvious one, but then the frequency that the measurements are returned, the longevity of the sensor, how deployable it is. In order to detect a trend, you need to be able to characterize all of the timescales and natural variability that are going to confound the trend. And in order to do that, you really need to have a good sense of the conditions within the region where you're expecting to deploy it. So I would argue that while Tosta said we can think through all those things and we have frameworks that we can use to think through what would be necessary, I would also suggest that it takes a lot of thinking, and it takes a pretty good understanding of your system and the problem and the limits and the signal that you're expecting to see in order to come up with an answer to that question. It's really going to depend from application to application. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Brendan. All right, I'm going to shift gears a little bit with this next question. This is it's got a lot of words in here. You might want to read in the chat, but this is focusing on the blue tech clusters, incubators, accelerators, and entities providing test beds. Is that a good way to facilitate market growth? Or is their impact more limited to creating and growing competition? Are there successful examples of these mechanisms for facilitating market growth? And if so, what can be learned? How can we identify opportunities to fast track promising technologies in an efficient and standardized way, bridging the interface between innovation and mature markets? Zach, then Yi.
Oh yes, absolutely essential. I think this is the way forward. Shout out to Synchro for all your hard work setting up testbed. I'll let you guys give your accolades. Something we're doing in Bristlemouth as well that I think has been really effective is advanced hardware commitments and hardware grants. Sometimes some groups just need a leg up to get to proof of concept. So we've kind of built this advanced hardware commitment, these kind of micro grants in the form of a sort of accelerator. We've also seen this work in kind of crowdsourcing larger data sets. So like if you have a browser open, I mentioned backyard buoys earlier, Aqualink is another excellent one. Most of the users of Aqualink did not pay for their hardware, but they are maintaining it at a global scale. So that's not an accelerator in the traditional sense, but it is a much faster and more efficient way to get stuff out and get local buy-in, et cetera, et cetera. And then kind of the other things are these kind of smaller venture mechanisms that are kind of more closely related to, I say venture, but I mean investment, more closely related to a traditional accelerator like Schmidt Marine. I have to give them a shout out because when we were working on OpenRIV, they gave us this, I think it was their first ever mini pre-seed round, which got us started and kind of kick-started us this whole thing. So I think, short answer, yes. Long answer, there's some great work to take example from. And I hope the Synchro team can share some details in the chat for other people to follow up on.
Thanks, Zach. Let's go Yi, then Leif, and Amy.
Yeah, certainly we are very early stage of the growing period of the blue tech, ocean tech in general, leading to the blue economy more. This is natural to have more of these incubators, accelerators. Not only I enjoy working with Amy and Jason and the Synchro team, Schmidt Marine was mentioned as well. Philanthropic organization play a big role here. Of course, at some point there will be a consolidation or naturally, we're very busy. So at some point we have to think about how many is too many. But certainly at this stage, the more the better, and then they play a big role, fill a lot of gaps. But in the future, as we become more mature as a community, there will be a natural consolidation, and then so we don't have to worry about which meeting we're going to, which incubator we're going to join. Thank you.
Thanks, Yi. Leif?
So I was going to make a point so absolutely, yes, the clusters and accelerators are important, and when they create runway, and don't fall in a pitfall of just building more pilots. We don't need that. So what we need is that more are crossing, the TRL 6 to 8 valley of death, the hard part. So whether there are some official ways of measuring this, the different accelerators and so on, I don't know, but yeah, take care around that.
Mm-hmm. And Amy, we'll wrap this question with you. You got called out a few times there at the beginning.
I know, I don't know if I should feel special, but thanks, Zach and team. I feel like I should raise my hand at this point. I like I kind of feel like I mentioned a little bit before, but with just identifying what's out there, many of these lower cost ones don't even have websites, right? Or a following. They're not even a market. So what we've heard, obviously, there's a barrier to testing, and we try to remove that. And are we going to change the market with just one test? No, probably not. We would need a lot of test beds around the world. This is very much just in one region, right? But we're sort of setting a foundation and a process to make it easier for some companies than without access to testing. And we're also hopefully creating lessons on how to make it more streamlined. ACT has been called out in the comments. This is a previous testing thing that was pretty rigorous, as I understand. We definitely talked to Mario, and he's been part of our co-design meetings on how to make Synchro easier to get into. But like this helps create maybe the beginnings of markets for it, because I'll tell you how many people come to us to go, do you know where we could find an accessible X sensor? Do you know where we can find this sensor? And we're like, oh, here are these new companies that have come to us. But what I want to emphasize is the big part of this is connecting users, right, to these potential rooms. That connection we've heard is missing. And we also can hear directly from incubators, like, the blue, like Vanessa Scott's on the phone, on the call. Those, we can have a streamlined almost pathway from these incubators that help the testing, and even our funders, Schmidt Funding, who are out there finding these super gems, and help expose them to more people, more users, create this like beginnings of a market, and trust, at least in what the product is. Okay, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Amy. All right, so we're going to wrap up the discussion on this section. And again, great input from everybody. We're just taking a short 5-minute break. We're not going to take the full 10 minutes, and that's just to transfer everybody over into the general screen. And when we come back, and that will be at 37 after the hour, we'll open it up to everyone to input questions either via the chat or by raise hand feature. So we'll see you in just a few minutes. All right, I'd like to welcome everyone back so we can get into our open discussion and final Q&A for this first dialogues in this series. All right, great. Well, let's get started. I know Casey in the chat gave some instructions on how this will work. So people who are observers and been watching the discussion, you will not go on camera. We'll just mute or unmute you as you raise your hand for questions, and or you can put them in the chat and we will bring those out as well. So Terry, I see you have a question already out.
Yes, I think I'm unmuted.
Yes.
Hi, thanks, Hans. Terry McConnell here with Possibility Ocean. I've worked with many of you over the past years, and my experience with you on the topic of creating the ocean observing system of the future has been that scientists are exhausted, corporate players are confused, and entrepreneurs are frustrated. We need to turn our attention to exciting the investors, the regulators, the politicians. Storytelling is something that we need to get better at. Storytelling about what might be possible when we have fully instrumented the ocean. So we need to start from the end. We need to assume the ocean is fully instrumented and then create stories about what the possible benefits are of that situation and bring that to the investors, the regulators, and the politicians to get them excited to move off the current status quo. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Terry. Any input back from our panelists? Go ahead, Sander.
Just want to say, well said. I echo that. I think most of us do. So yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree.
So one of the goals as we look at how these dialogues are utilized, and that is really we're looking for areas of recommendation and examples that can be actionable. So while this can be any type of discussion that our observers want to bring in, I'll even offer up a few prompts that might help stimulate some additional questions. And looking at AI can be used within the ocean enterprise in the following manner or ways. Reductions in magnitude of cost for ocean observing can be best achieved by looking at enablers like AI and quantum navigation. They have potential to transform the ocean observing markets by, and it would be worthy of further investigation for particular purposes. So anytime that we can pull on this this group that we have together for really trying to define some actionable recommendations would be very helpful as we move through the end of this first series. Who do we have? Igor.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm glad to take part in this great conversation. Just back from Caribbean, and so I'm now from citizen science side and retired oceanographer and calibration engineer with 20 years experience in academics and 20 years in industry. Company RBR, probably you know that name. And so 2 years ago, we started our own project to get more sailors involved in collecting ocean data. So I get great present from company, good CTD system, which I can operate from my sailboat, and was sailing from Canada down to Caribbean and performing measurements, profiling with CTD system, collecting data, and trying to transfer that data to World Ocean database. And the main point that a huge interest from sailing community in doing that job, because we do presentation of in many marinas and anchoring places, and a huge interest from sailors to be involved in this kind of real scientific data collection. The biggest problem is the cost, and yeah, you're right. There should be something to reduce that cost. But my point, I work in the industry and work in calibration, and if we want to make good instrument, durable and accurate instrument, we cannot drop costs to $1,000. So it could be at least $3,000-$5,000. It's a limit for industry, unless there would be some super great invention and innovation introduced, but not for now. How we can reduce cost of data, that's what my point. We're implementing many low-cost instrumental platform like gliders or sail drones or sailboats. So people on the sailboats can do very good job to collect data and with low cost. But academics should, or federal government should spread this funding to get for leaving something for sailors, and that would be option to make more people involved in data collection and get more excitement from their side what they see under their boat and what they do for science. So if you're interested, so it's the sailforscience.com, our website. And also run salinometry.com project with showing standards for oceanographic measurements, CTD system, salinometers, and etc. That's my point. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Igor. Also want to point out, if those who don't want to ask live, you can put your comments and feedback in the chat, which will be recorded and will be useful for us as we put together the synthesis from this conversation. Any other questions or feedback from our observers who are with us today? Oh, Terry, go ahead. And Pierre after Terry.
All right, I've always got a big mouth, so I'll throw in another comment. We have a bit of a crisis currently with the geopolitical situation, funding being reduced for ocean observing, not just in the US, but in many other areas. That crisis actually could be turned into an opportunity in the sense that corporations in the maritime environment rely upon free ocean data to manage the efficiency of their operations, to manage their risk profile. And in that sense, we should be engaging with them on an exercise of identifying what is the business impact of a reduction in data availability. Quantify that financially from their efficiency gain or losses, the risk increases within the companies, and turn that then to, okay, if this is going to hit you, impact you financially to this degree, are you willing to spend money on new business models, new sensors, new support gate programs to get what you have lost back so that you can get your business back on track? So there is an opportunity here to push the corporations down a track that they might not otherwise have been willing or thought to take. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Terry. Pierre. Pierre, can you hear us? We do not hear you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. So I have to restart. Thank you very much to all of you. That was a fantastic panel. It was very lively, very refreshing, excellent. What I found most interesting and intriguing was that it wasn't a black and white discussion of accessible sensors versus traditional sensors. It was very nuanced, and what I really liked is that we really had a spectrum displayed here. And what do I mean by that? We found many items that needs to be addressed, that help any sensing, that help ocean observing in general, that propel the ocean enterprise forward. And that is what I thought was really interesting. So there are technological trends, there are aspects that are changing at the moment, which will impact ocean observing in various aspects. I also found this idea of maybe we need to shift away from the sensor and platform and really look at, okay, accessible data in a sense. That was very nice. I also found this component of getting the more private sector, more market-driven demands into the EUV environment is a very interesting idea, bringing the market-driven applications a little bit closer to the scientific application, a little bit more together. That is all very good input, and all unites a little bit under that umbrella of having a more developed ocean enterprise to benefit from these developments. And I also wrote it there in the comments. What we need to be careful, though, is that in order to make the ocean enterprise attractive also for economic interests, for private interests, we mustn't stumble the profitability of it, right? I mean, it must be economically healthy for being able to pay for innovation, to hire more staff and proceed there. Yeah, these are my thoughts. So thank you very much again. A very nice start into that third dialogue. Thank you.
Thanks, Pierre. Yi?
Yeah, thank you. All the previous speakers, especially Terry, talk about turning crisis into opportunities. And many of us developing platforms and then use cases, deliver data, has been targeting quite a bit of research market, grant-driven opportunities. With the slowdown or reduction of those resources, indeed is opportunity to look for commercial market opportunities, finding those paying customers. Can we put a price on the data for ocean application? Can we come up with the success stories in a private enterprise? How do we get a ocean-based unicorn status and then compared to climate tech and then defense tech and other consumer-related technology? When we work on the grants and working with the government, typically they come up with success stories. What are the success stories in our ocean community? Bring those to the investors, educate the lay community so that we can become ocean tech, a business enterprise, and have our own community being recognized.
Thanks, Yi. Leif.
I was gonna make a comment around funding, and as that was up here a bit earlier. So keep in mind, it's not always fat-funded, startups that succeed. One thing my career taught me: lean startups are great at discovery. So iterate quickly, pivot when data disagree, stretch every dollar. Being a bit hungry isn't a bad thing. And then yeah, that would be a sort of a comment around the funding part.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good point. Amy.
I feel like I'm going to see if I can put all the points together, but Yi just mentioned sort of these success stories. We're struggling. There's a community of us that we are formally putting together, the AOT, the Accessible Ocean Tech community. And we're often, part of this is trying to figure out how we can give a value proposition. What's the contribution we have? But part of that is like, what are the stories out there of what is successful? We just need some better storytelling. So we have, just so you know, there's like groups in different regions of the world that are all asking these same questions, and we're all working towards the same thing. And so there is a group of us that have all come together to start sort of a community of community meetings. We have, like we said, we have the Scoop website. All of this is to connect the users, the developers, the science, the engineers, the citizens, so they can find us all in one place. Because the more that like our bigger ocean community can recognize that this is a real field and there are real people and there's some structure to it, it helps like get beyond this data desert. So I just want to put a plug that there is a group of us, and we're trying to bring the world a little closer together. And we've managed to hit like 3 areas, I think. Southeast Asia, we're working on you. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Thanks, Amy. So I'm gonna go to our observers. We have 2 questions there, and that's gonna wrap our conversation so we can get into our final next steps before we end today. So I'm gonna call on Carrie first and then Michael. And Carrie, are you there?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Yes, Carrie Strong with Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. We have a program called Science Rex, which is research on commercial ships. And one of the incentives that I stumbled across with this project is the Poseidon Principles, which are banks and insurance companies that give incentives to ship owners to green their fleets. So that whether that's using greener paint or greener fuels or better hull design, they have created a formula with these mathematicians from MIT and another company in the Northeast here, and they give them points and they get cheaper loans from the banks, and they get cheaper insurance rates from their insurance companies. So there's that, and I think I've asked them, the company that did this formula, can we put a value on scientific sensors that are at sea and collecting data? And they said, yeah, sure. So I think that's one way to move forward and find a value for what you're doing that translates to business, because right now it's, we don't always know what we're going to find or what the future is. It's evolving. And then the other thing is we are working Science Rocks with the National Academies, Ocean Science Board to put a workshop together next year, and that will incorporate sensor manufacturers, politicians, State departments, ship owners, scientists, of course. So we're really trying to cross-pollinate and get as many people in the room as possible, because we do need to change things, like I mentioned in the chat, like EEZs. We can collect data, but not everywhere. So how do we make this easier on science? So anyway, watch that space. Thank you. Great conversation today.
Thanks, Carrie. Michael, you get a minute to wrap us up today.
Here we go. Yes, hey, Michael Quill, Marine Programs Director at Los Angeles Waterkeeper. Not much going on, Hill. Just, we've solved all the world's problems here, so just come to LA. I just want to say I really appreciated what I heard today. I'm working with so many different people on both sides of the fence, left, right, down the middle, profits, nonprofits, Educational Works, NOAA, just to keep my boat afloat. I'm out on the water quite a bit. What I'm really finding now is that we have a variety of different people putting out information so that it's kind of being dissipated. And we can go from beach reports, water quality reports, and the basic denial of our community in LA to face the facts that there are things going on that aren't so great in our ocean. So this effort and this group can open up possibilities to get accessible information that are engaging to the public, that educate, not hit them over the head with doomsday, because we all know in this group, everybody knows what's going down. But I would say the general public out here will walk past high sewage content in the water and go swimming, because by God, they're in LA and they're going to go swimming. The water quality is always bad. Now, that's a general consensus of a lot of different information we're getting, and we don't get much good information about what human activities have influence on this planet. So I really appreciate having this avenue and this connection, and hopefully some data sharing processes that I can hear. I'm working with so many different people, and I'm chasing contrary information quite a bit. But thank you for this. I appreciate being on the mailing list, and I'll stay tuned.
Great. Thanks, Michael. And I just want to say thanks to everybody. We had just a fantastic discussion today. I don't know that I could have anticipated it going as well as it did. Just everyone's feedback was perfect. And with that, my gratitude to all, but I'm going to turn it back over to Zdenka now to wrap up today's conversation.
So I just need to echo what Hans just said. Hans, thank you for your amazing moderation. I also want to thank the participants and the observers for all of the comments, both verbally and in the chat. This does not happen in a vacuum. We have had an amazing, dedicated observing organization committee, and you see them on your screen here. And so this really is a group effort that have spent a lot of time curating the use case studies, the background paper. So let me tell you what happens next. We put together a summary report that is non-attributional, that looks at pulling out the main points and the actionable recommendations. And we'll do that both from the conversation of the participants and what we found in the chat. It takes our group 1 week to do that. We will then send the draft report out to all the participants on the 20th of October and ask you to provide feedback. Now, these are not long reports. Purposely, they're not long reports, so you have a chance to provide your feedback, and with our goal of getting your feedback in a week, because Casey, you can go to the next slide. We would like to have the first report posted ahead of our second session of this dialogue with industries. So you see we have our second session on the 29th of October, and those invites have been going out to participants. And if you're interested, continue to reach out to us so that we can continue to broaden our participation in these dialogues with industries. And then our final one will be on the 19th of November. So with that, I'm going to end our conversation today with, again, one more thank you. This has been an absolutely amazing session. So thank you so much, and have a great remainder of your day or afternoon or evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Zdenka.
Thanks, everyone. We'll be shutting down the webinar right now. Have a great rest of your day, evening, night.
Bye, everybody.